Oh, is it summer yet? Hi.
I'm sorry to say it's not summer yet.
No.
We are working one day closer each day to the beauty of summer.
Yeah, exactly. We're right in the thick of cold and flu and weird fucking season. Why just, yeah, it's totally whack right now.
It is totally whack. On that note, welcome to another juicy
Yes.
episode of Getting Juicy. Actually, very much getting juicy. Today, Rachel and I have the pleasure of speaking with a gentle human by the name of Dubs Weinblatt. Dubs Weinblatt identifies as a transgender queer human being and resides from New York, I believe, from what I understand. So they are joining us 3 hours ahead, like some of our previous guests. I found out about Dubs from a shared community network through another guest that I found out that I would love to have us on the show in the future once our schedules line up. And through them, I was connected to Dubs. Dubs has a lot of story and a lot of richness to contribute to this dialogue, which we're about to embark on in the next 5 or so minutes. Dubs is a member of the Jewish community, the queer community, and the trans community, and the non-binary community. They are also very much an advocate for equity in Jewish communities, especially relating it with the queer Jewish community in
Mhm.
New York. He has also traveled across to lead workshops on inclusivity and really diversity within the mixture of the communities as a whole, and has a wonderful background when it comes to improv acting, and is also the host of their own podcast titled "Thank You for Coming Out." And so it seems like they have been through a wonderful journey that I only know very minimal of, whatever I could learn about their website. And Rachel and I are really grateful to have this opportunity to connect with someone who really covers a lot of different communities, perhaps that normally we don't get a chance to connect with.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think Dubs also is a pretty avid writer. So I believe not that long ago they came out with saying that they're in the middle of writing a book, I
Okay.
believe, which is awesome. And I'm just looking at some of their writing, talking about in Judaism, how the very conservative Judaism talks about queer and those kinds of people that identify as transgender or whatever it might be, that LGBTQ plus community is not really, for a lack of better term, not really welcome
Mm,
in, real Orthodox communities, right? So, I just was reading this one headline of something they wrote, and it says, "We're all made in God's image, including trans Jews like me. I was made the way I am because it's who I am meant to be, and the Torah gave me that." So interesting. Yeah, like I kind of curious to know what their journey has been through, if there was any, maybe not always an inclusive part to the Jewish community for Dubs, kind of what that journey was like. So
yeah, I agree. And I think,
we'll see. Yeah.
well, I think it's one of those scenarios where, as much as we can introduce a guest and kind of have a general lay of the land of what their background might be and where they come
Mhm.
from, this is someone that has such a diverse and rich background that I know we sometimes talk about that. I don't want to bastardize or to dilute or minimize any of the introduction that they could provide you and I, but I feel that some guests like this, it's almost more powerful to give that knowledge of this is who I am and where I come from and what I'm doing, and I want to be able to connect with them on those threads that they love to
Mhm.
kind of sow, I guess.
Mhm.
So, with that being said, how are you feeling right now?
Yeah, I'm like, we didn't even, this is one of the first times we've just really gone right into introducing the guest for almost the whole intro before even asking each other how we are. Normally it's the other
Yeah,
way around.
that's true.
Yeah, I'm doing okay. Speaking of health anxiety, went through a whole bout of, um, long story short, I have shingles, people, which is basically just a resurgence or resurfacing of chicken pox. So whoever's had chicken pox as a kid, I would say like the majority of the people I know had it as a kid. I think now there might even be a vaccine for it for kids, who knows? But anyway, usually the majority of people once in their life will have a resurgence of it, which is called shingles. It can be brought on by stress. It can be brought on by lots of other things. And I thought they were spider bites at first. And I went through, this is what's so interesting. Okay. So sometimes like, I thank you for science, because science allowed me to get a swab, right? And a test and a lab. And then a few days later told me I have shingles, because if it wasn't for that, I would still be wondering what it is. Okay. Yeah, I'm feeling like somewhat better, knock on wood. I don't have the fever or the upset stomach anymore and stuff like that. And the marks I will not even show you because they're disgusting and they'll go away. But my point is, I consulted with like 4 doctors or something like that, and asking like, showing pictures, what are these, blah, 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 blah. That's just because I'm Jewish. I don't just trust like one person. I have to question everybody. Fuck,
The
So
4
anyway, it was
questions.
like, so
4
anyway,
doctors.
out of the 4 doctors, only one guessed the right thing.
Wow.
So that's what's fascinating. By looking in symptoms, only one. The 2 of them thought for sure was spider bites. One of the other ones said some sort of other viral infection that, usually is passed on through children, not hand, foot, and mouth. I don't even have kids and I'm not even around kids. Anyway, I just thought that was fascinating. I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. So 25%, a quarter of them got it right.
Wow.
Right.
That doesn't really sit right with me. And I can imagine it would not sit that right with you.
Well, because apparently so I guess my point is, science is amazing. It's great that we can get these, have access to these tests. They can send them away and they can show you, okay, actually it is this. They can't always do that with things that you might have, but, I think that apparently, because it didn't show up as a typical looking shingles, apparently.
Okay.
So it wasn't like, yeah, anyway.
But it wasn't a Pringle, right?
It wasn't a Pringle and it wasn't a jingle, because I was thinking of like
Jingle.
holidays. Jingles.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, no, my arm's not jingling. It's only here. Knock on wood. Like some people will get the rash on their face or like, ugh, like again,
Yeah.
wood,
Well, and
wood,
also
but
you see the 3 minimal craters on my forehead that I'm showing?
I
Especially the one
do
at the top.
actually. I do. Chicken pox.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember
scars.
as a kid when I had it. I remember when I had it as a kid. I remember when Zach, my brother, and I had it, and we were like, yeah, I actually my brain works in mysterious ways, but I can actually put myself back in my like 4-year-old body, and I can actually close my eyes and visualize everything that we were playing Super Mario on the Nintendo. Like,
wow.
Things like that. I can remember like it was yesterday, 26 years ago, whenever it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because some of those, if it's not necessarily, I don't want to use the word traumatic, but it was something that was like just very strange, being itchy all over your body and blah, blah, blah. They probably maybe remember those kinds of things.
I don't,
you had to be at home. Yeah.
I remember my digestive health being really, really off. And I remember the temperature, the rise in temperature in my body, things like that. So
yeah. So that's so interesting.
I know. Hello.
Hi, Dubs.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well.
Good. We're having a riveting conversation about shingles and chickenpox.
Oh,
I know.
Interesting.
I know. Well, because I'm just getting over shingles, and we were just talking about how it is a resurgence essentially of the chickenpox if you had it as a kid, and then Hero was showing me his scars from chickenpox as a kid, and anyway, we just we chat about all kinds of things.
As you can probably figure out pretty quickly.
Well, and you might appreciate this, actually, the Jewish thing. So I was laughing because I said to Hero, I went just because I can't trust just one doctor. I had to ask like 4 or 5 different doctors. What is this on my arm? What is this? What is this? One doctor got it right out of 4 or 5. And so it was finally after a swab that's the test result. And it was 1 out of the 4 or 5. So you know what? It's okay to question.
Yeah. I said at least 4 times, four times.
Well, what did the other doctors say it was?
Spider bites. That was one I got from a couple of them. And then some other kind of viral thing that usually is passed around by children, but I don't have kids and I'm not even around kids much. So anyway.
Jeez.
Yeah. but how are you? This is how we roll. We're just kind of like fly by the
We're
seat of
just
our
free
pants.
spirited. Yeah. You're talking
That's
to two Aquarians. So
I'm a Sag. I don't actually know anything about what
That's okay.
signs are, but
free spirited, on the cusp, rolling around, roll with the flow.
And
okay, cool.
you're calling in from caller. Are you calling in from New York?
I'm not actually. I'm in Texas with my parents, so
Got it.
I'm
Okay.
calling you from Texas.
Okay.
Where in Texas are you?
It's called Harlingen, and it's.
I've heard of Harlingen.
Wow. Okay. No
What?
one ever hears of it. How do you know Harlingen?
That's
Someone that I was getting to know in the summer who was from Texas, lives in Austin. They would always fly into Harlingen and then drive to the Mexican border and things like that. So that's how I heard of the name.
Got it. Yeah.
interesting.
I know. It's so interesting how people that you date in the past actually can bring some education to you. Who would have thought?
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
Would have thought. Yeah. So okay,
Yeah.
you're in Harlingen. Wonderful.
Yeah.
And do you live in New York? I feel like I had some connection.
Yeah. I live in Brooklyn.
Okay, my
Sweet.
cousin's in Brooklyn as well, so that's a nice connection there too. Nice.
Cool. And
Awesome.
remind me where you both are based.
So I'm in Vancouver, BC, right in the main city, downtown part.
And I'm actually like about 5 hours drive southeast from Vancouver. I'm in British Columbia as well. I'm in a place called Vernon. So yeah, good old Canadians.
Yeah.
Cool. I
Yeah.
was just in Vancouver in
Whoa.
September.
What were you doing over there?
I really wanted to see the Pacific Northwest, and so my friend and I did like Portland, Seattle, then we took a bus to Vancouver.
Wow.
And my friend Lauren is shooting a TV show in Vancouver, so it was like a very good reason
Sweet.
to go there. A nice place to stay, and got to spend time with my friend, and she took us all around and did some hikes and some boating, and it was just really, 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 really awesome.
And you got some really nice weather, I think.
Yeah, it was really good weather.
Yeah, because we had a very good extension of summer, and like that's awesome.
And tonight, especially like if it's snowing in Vancouver downtown, it's snowing everywhere because it's the warmest point in the city is downtown as far as my knowledge goes. So you got the best weather because now like we had our first major snowfall. So glad you could get the weather while you had it. And
yeah.
And so I was saying to Rachel how I was able to get connected with you was actually by Tawny Lara or Tawny Lara, however you say their last name. Lara, thank you. Lara. And so we were trying to have Tawny come on the show, but our schedules weren't really matching up for now, at least. And I saw the event that you and Tawny were hosting in December. And so I thought these people seem totally up our alley, and why would I not want to connect with them? So I want to thank you for being so readily interested and available, but also just from the shared communities we have. And I thought this is someone that just totally matches our vision and our ethos, I guess you could put it. We did a little brief introduction about you, just kind of going through your website and just kind of picking out some of the highlights, but we always love our guests to introduce themselves, just in case we miss anything. And you have such a rich background. I didn't want to miss anything that you want to share as we open up our dialogue.
Cool. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Oh, you want me to do it right now?
Oh, yeah, right now.
I didn't know what we're doing. Okay, great. Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm Weinblatt. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I am an educator and a speaker, a podcaster. What else do I do? I'm a producer.
You're a writer, aren't you?
I'm a writer. Yeah, I'm a writer. Forget all I'm a multi-hyphenate. I used to work at this organization called Keshet, which is Hebrew for rainbow. And so working at an organization, it was very easy for me to be like, I'm the associate director, blah, 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 and like, period. But now that I like work for myself, I like try to encompass all the things that I do. So I run a company called Thank You for Coming Out, and it centers and uplifts queer identity through improv shows and a podcast and speaking engagements. And I also do a lot of DEI trainings for different companies. I write stuff. Right now we just launched, we're going to be putting out a book, and we're going to be curating essays. Yeah. And so hopefully maybe we can link to it in the like post or show notes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we do that for sure.
Okay, cool. Because so it's we want to hear, how people submit, and we want this book to represent the complete diversity and beautiful ways in which our identities intersect, through the queer community and beyond, through different essays. So yeah.
Wow.
What else about me? I'm from Ohio. That matters to me. I've been sober for 2.5 years. Actually, it'll be 2.5 years on December 1st.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
I'm a genderqueer, transgender Jew. I don't know. That's like the most like random piece together bio.
No, that's a great summary. And we don't have any agenda when we chat with our guests. We genuinely want to flow and just chat and shoot the shit. It's really a casual kind of like hang out in the kitchen kind of idea. So Don't worry about any like ulterior motive or anything that we want to like receive from you as a guest. This is a safe, inclusive, brave space for you to share what you wish, to not share what you don't feel comfortable with. And that's kind of how we roll. So I guess what I wanted to kind of dive into is that how did you get into everything that you're doing? What was like the starting thread that kind of led to along the way?
That's it's a very good question, and I'm trying to think of like what the starting thread is.
Where to start?
Yeah. I would say, well, it actually really started from like birth, truly. As I mentioned, I was born in Columbus, Ohio, or the Midwest, in Columbus, Ohio, in the 80s. And there was not a lot of queer representation. There was not a lot of Jewish queer representation. And by a lot, I mean, there was none. I talk to people now who were like, I was in the closet, or, maybe there were one or two people, but no one who, the people who were out didn't represent the identities that I hold. And so it was a different kind of representation, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
And so my whole life I felt other. I felt different. I felt like I didn't belong, both in just like in secular spaces and in Jewish spaces. And so that helped. I don't want to say helped. It started my drinking issues of like trying to numb and escape and basically like get out of town. And the way to do it for me was drinking. And I know I'm not alone in that. For decades of feeling like I didn't belong and struggling with my identity and feeling like deep sense of loneliness and hopelessness I was just telling a friend this earlier of like, I could never envision a future for myself because I didn't know what it could look like because I wasn't living authentically and genuinely. And so I didn't know how to grow up or like know what to dream. And so it's just, that's like very lonely. It's a lonely, sad, hard feeling. Yeah. So, as I was growing up and meeting new people and moving out of Ohio, I lived in Chicago for a bit, and then I moved to New York. Finally started becoming, coming into myself and learning more about myself and the communities around me. And I share all of that because that's like the thread of like why I do what I do. It's like to create community, to create opportunities both to share stories and see stories and see representation and visibility into all of the different ways or that of like possibility. And so that's kind of the long version. Actually, that's the short version.
Don't worry. The short version is great. And then it'll unravel into a longer version as we continue dialoguing. And I can tell this hour is going to fly by. I can tell. And that's always a great sign.
Well, there's from everything you just said, there's so many questions I have already. Like, for number one, did you grow up in quite a religious family then? Like, I mean, because here when I talk a lot about how for us, we've always been like, we've been ishy Jews, like we celebrated the holidays. I never went to synagogue. Like I never even had a bat mitzvah until I went to Israel on birthright many years later. And they did like a kind of a faux like bat mitzvah. But anyway, so how was it for you in the Jewish community growing up?
I grew up in a Reform synagogue, so we
Okay.
weren't like
Yeah.
super observant
Yeah.
in that way. I went to synagogue on high holidays, and I went to Hebrew school and Sunday school. I did have a bat mitzvah.
Okay. Yeah.
I did not want a bat mitzvah, but I didn't have the language to like be able to articulate, I don't want to become a woman. You know, like I
Right.
just didn't know how
Yeah.
to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I felt like even if I
Mm.
were to say that, I wouldn't know how to back it up, and I don't think anyone would have understood what I was trying to say. And
Right.
because
Right.
that must have been like 97 or something. And so there's
Yeah.
just
Right.
like, of course, trans people have existed forever, but like we weren't, at least in my world, we weren't talking about it.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I tried desperately to like feel part of my Jewish community, like so through like Sunday school and Hebrew school and youth group.
Mhm.
When I went to the Ohio State and was like part of the Hillel there. Trying desperately to find where I fit in, and there
Right.
was always like a little bit of a disconnect, and always like I really so badly want this, and like I don't feel like I belong.
Mm.
Mhm.
Hmm. You're the exact same age as me, I think.
Hmm.
Just going through like the 90s and the age you are or were. And yeah, that's a weird, it's, you know, in Hero, not to like throw you under
No,
the
no,
bus here, but
not at
Hero's
all.
like a whole decade younger. And
Yeah.
so there were some differences growing up, and with what
Completely.
people
Major
might have been
differences.
exposed to, or people were accepting of, or, you know, those kinds of things. I mean, so with that being said, because I know you were part of, what was the organization you were part of for a long time, I guess, with the Jewish.
Keshet.
Yeah. So was that like taking all the experiences you had? How did that kind of roll into that position?
Yeah, it's a really
I
good
mean,
question.
tons probably.
For
Yeah.
sure. So, it was in 2016 when I had top surgery,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
I was like really coming into figuring out who I am. And I was working at a tech startup company, and it just was not the environment that I needed to be in.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't, you know, for a long time, I was like, it was so toxic and it was terrible. And the more I think about it, I think like the executive team, and they really were trying,
Mm.
but they didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what to do, but they were looking to me to tell them what to do, and I was like,
Mm.
I truly have no clue.
Mm-hmm.
But they were trying. But anyways, um I realized, like, as I was figuring out my gender identity, I felt like I was still missing. So essentially when I left college, I kind
Mm-hmm.
of left Judaism. I was like, there's
Okay.
nowhere for me to be. I'd rather focus on my queer identity, where I can find queer community where I feel like I belong.
Right.
And Judaism doesn't have that for me. So there was like about a decade where I was just kind of not even Jewish, just like whatever, like
Mm-hmm.
not
Right.
even paying attention. And
Mm-hmm.
um, so as I was coming into my trans identity, um, I realized that I was still missing this core piece of who I am, and that was my Jewish identity, my Jewishness.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so Keshet, so I knew Keshet existed, but I just was kind of, you know, they were based in Boston, and all their jobs were always in Boston. And so it was the fall of 2016, which was the presidential election. It was that day there was the election day, and they posted a job, New York or Boston. And I was like, I have to have this job. And it was
Wow.
like an associate position. It would have been like me starting my career completely over,
Wow.
tens of thousands of dollars pay cut. And I went into these interviews like, I want this more than I've ever wanted anything in my life. Like, I need to be in an explicitly queer and Jewish space. And
Yeah.
so being able to talk about my past experiences of desperately wanting that, and knowing that there's like having like high expectations of Jewish community, of like, we can be radically inclusive, and like, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
They gave me the job, and I was so thrilled. And so like, through getting to work in this explicitly queer and Jewish organization, I got to see people like me and meet people like me, and I really hadn't before that, which is so sad to think about. And so I like met other trans Jews, and it just like blew my mind that that was a thing.
Yeah.
And So it was really powerful, really healing. And I definitely used my story and my experiences to help educate Jewish professionals all over the country, or did
Wow.
Jewish
Yeah.
professionals all over the country.
So it's like you helped, you needed them as much as they needed you, essentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
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 Holy, that is really unique and incredible. And again, how any better than someone like yourself to be able to make a ripple and really turn that into a movement, it seems like. And so when did you transition from working for Keshet and then to what you're doing now? What was the timeline on that?
Yeah. So I started at Keshet January of 2017, and I left December 31st of 2021. So 5
Okay.
years. I was there for 5 years.
Yeah.
So
Shy a
great
day.
length.
Yeah.
And maybe, like a 2 days or something. But and so just this year, 2022 is the first year that I've been kind of on my own,
Wow.
doing my own thing. And it's been a wild ride. I had some health stuff this summer. So I've just kind of just been like taking it easy. I've been, when I talk about it, it's like this year was like a neutral year for me, where I wasn't like going really hard. I was like, if work comes to me, I'm not going to say no to it unless I want to. And just like relaxing as much as I can. And then 2023 is when I'll start to like really pick things up.
Ramp it up again. Yeah. And so what was that transition from, like, what made you want to make that next jump then to doing your own thing?
Lots of things.
Okay. And like, you don't have to talk about all of them. I mean, it sounds like you're like, oh, I found this perfect. Like I was so into it. I got it. I, worked so hard. And then, I mean, 5 years is I think it's a great amount of time to give it like your all. And you either, gonna keep riding with it or maybe not. I don't know, but
yeah. 5 years is like a solid amount of time.
It's good.
It's the longest I've ever been at a job. And I was ready to move on. I just was, there came a point where I, had been doing the same, I'd moved up from associate and had been doing the same kind of, I was the associate director of education and training for Metro New York, which is a mouthful. I was the sole staff person who was building up the New York region of like the 5 boroughs, Westchester, and Long Island, which I don't know if you're familiar, but like that is a huge.
That's a lot. That's a huge.
Sounds like a lot to me. Yeah.
Huge, amount of work, and to build to be the person, holding those relationships and doing all the work. And so, I just, I had also had some health stuff last summer. It's been a rough couple of years, like not even pandemic, just
I was gonna say, and then that's just icing on the cake.
Right.
So
exactly.
Yeah.
And so I just got to a point where I was like, I was giving my all to Keshet. I was giving my all to Thank You for Coming Out. And I wasn't giving my all to myself. And I was like, if I'm going to spend 40 plus hours doing work that I care about, it really was more than that, because that's what I was doing with Keshet. And then Thank You for Coming Out after that. I was like, I need to like scale back and I need to like prioritize, and maybe it's time to prioritize myself.
Yeah.
And which
absolutely.
is my not that I wasn't passionate about my work at Keshet, I was, but wanted to see what I could do on my own. And so that was kind of the short version.
Yeah. Fair.
I feel like
shortness.
I can be very, 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 very long-winded, and so I'm trying very hard to be more succinct.
We're the same.
That's okay. We're
the same.
Typically all the 3 of us, I think, are the same in that sense.
So with respect and like privacy and stuff, you don't have to elaborate on some of the health things that you're going through, but is there anything that you're comfortable sharing that might help provide understanding of what was happening and how that also maybe you found resilience and perseverance and tenacity through it?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to share. I'm happy to share, but I am willing and open to share.
Yeah.
So I had thyroid cancer last year. And so it was one of those things where the doctors were like, thyroid, they're so like nonchalant. So first of all, I'm getting these biopsies and all these imaging, and they're like, it's not cancer. It's not cancer. Don't worry. It's like, it's never cancer. Don't worry. It's not cancer. And then it was, but
Oh
like
my
the way
gosh.
the like order of operations was really kind of fucked. And it was like, you don't have cancer, but we want to test it to make sure. We should probably remove half your thyroid to be sure. And like, this is kind of intense to like, if you're also assuring me it's not cancer.
Yeah.
So so before I knew it was cancer, I had the surgery to remove half my thyroid, and then they
Wow.
tested that half of my thyroid. And then 3 weeks later, I had to wait 3 weeks. And then they were like, yes, it was cancer, but we got it all and you're fine. And
Oh
Wow.
my God.
yeah. And like, we just have to monitor your thyroid forever now to make sure it doesn't pop up in your other half. And I'm like, okay, so everyone's assuring me it's not, it's kind of like what you were saying earlier, like everyone's assuring me, and yet
There's no certainty.
See,
There's
and
no clarity.
thank you. Yeah. And it's so interesting that it's interesting that I brought that up actually. And then with your story, because we kind of have to be our own advocates too, right? In the system. But with that being said, what I had said to Hero, before you popped on too, is I'm so also grateful for science, because if it wasn't for science and the tests and the swab or whatever, and for you and the test results to come back, like that's how like unfortunately you can't always just go by somebody's opinion necessarily, I guess. I don't know. I mean,
exactly.
Geez.
Yeah. So it was like, so it's almost like, in my experience of people who have cancer, it's like, you have cancer and then you do treatments, right? But for me, it was like treatment. Then I found out I had cancer.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm grateful that they got it, and I'm fine, and like didn't have to do radiation or chemotherapy or anything like that. But and the doctors were so kind of just like nonchalant about it. They're like, if you're gonna get cancer, like thyroid's the one to get. And I was like, I get it. Like, it really was low risk, low, few people die from it, but also so few people get it. And so now that they're saying there's no way it's cancer, and then it was, I'm like, well, I could die. Like, you're saying I can't die,
Yeah.
And so it and I know it's like, I do know that it's like, it is the like least, quote unquote, everyone like least scary of all of the cancers. And yet to have a cancer diagnosis is like terrifying.
Yeah. It's terrifying completely.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
No, you please. See, this is what, please, you go ahead. Continue your thought, please.
Well, so I was just going to actually let them like bring you to what the summer held, which was, I'm someone who suffers from chronic headaches. I've had them for decades. And so I, every once in a while, will be like, I need to go to a neurologist to figure this out. So I went to one in February, and we did an MRI, and they're like, we see like calcifications. It doesn't look like anything. Let's come back in 6 months and we'll do another scan to see. And so that was August. And I don't know what if you have with your like healthcare in Canada, but within New York, like the results from whatever you have like come to your app. So whether you've talked to your doctor or not, yes, that's how I found out I had cancer. Like, I was like, I know carcinoma, I know that word. And so I get this results in August, and it has like either this kind of tumor, this kind of tumor, or this kind of tumor. And I'm like, okay, so I have a tumor in my brain. What the fuck?
My
so
God.
It was so intense. And like their neurologist was like, honestly, like, I'm a headache neurologist. This is out of my like ballpark, like my what's it called? And
league.
Like,
yeah.
And so she had to refer me to a neuro-oncologist. And I was like, I know what oncology is. Like, that's a fucking scary word. And I couldn't see her for a month. And so, cause she was booked.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And so I just was like, I had this month of like,
oh my God,
I was like, I'm going to die. I have a fucking brain tumor.
Yeah.
Or it could be nothing, like,
oh my God,
it was the entire range of what it could or couldn't be.
Yeah.
And it was really hard to like not spiral every 2 seconds. Yeah. And so I went to so spoiler, I'm fine. But like,
thank
I
God.
should have started. I should have led with that.
I know. Sorry. I'm like on the edge of my seat. Like, what the heck?
That's the storyteller in me of like building suspense. But like with the health, it's like, I'm fine. it's so small, and they missed it in February, which is concerning to me, but also so they because this neuro-oncologist also didn't know what it was, she took it. They have these like brain tumor like board conferences where like
you're going to say that the boomers, although all the baby boomers get together.
Well, probably
maybe.
Except my neuro-oncologist is like our age,
okay,
and is like super cool. Which I'm also like, people my age can be neuro-oncologists. Like I still feel like I'm 12.
Like me too.
Yeah. But so again, long story short, but this is still long.
It's all good.
Like, so they looked at the scan from February to August, and they ended up seeing the tumor in February that they had missed the first time. And they're like, but the good news is it didn't grow. And if it's dangerous, it would have grown in that 6 months.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So she's like, you know what? It's just going to live in there. And if it grows, so I have to have it monitored every 6 months, 3 months for a while, then 6, then a year, but forever I have to have it monitored. And she's like, it could even grow to the size of a golf ball. And if it's not impacting your functionality, then leave it in there. And I said,
wow.
Okay. So I was just like, she's like, you could call it a lesion, you could call it a tumor. And I was like, I don't know, lesion feels weird too. Both words are weird to me.
Yeah.
So it's just like, all this health stuff. And I'm just like, I really want to like protect my time, protect my energy. Cause it's like, I already like face death in this way of like, I'm going to die. And like, this is scary. And like, I got to like YOLO this up because you never know. It's so fucking scary and hard.
100%. And I don't know, do you have the quintessential Jew brain? Sorry to put it that way, but like, okay. Because 100%, more than 100%.
What's the quintessential Jew brain?
Oh, just like how, like, I don't know, anxious about everything and worrying about my health and questioning. I don't know. That's kind of what I meant, but I don't know if you thought that's what I meant. But
I knew that's what I thought you meant. Yeah,
I knew that both of you were picking up what you were putting down. I just wanted to get clarity on that.
That's fair. That's fair. But so with that being said, and do you I guess mental health wise, how did you have any tools or things that you put into place? Was your mental health something that you worked on prior to all these things happening? Was it something that you're now more focused on, perhaps?
Yeah, mental health is something that I have been focusing on very dedicatedly. That I don't know the right way to say that. With a lot of dedication. Mostly since 2014.
Okay.
Because it was when I was like realizing, having this aha moment of my gender identity and just like, oh, I gotta like figure this out. I want to talk about this.
Yeah.
So I have been in therapy for sometimes twice a week, but mostly either every week or every other week now. Like henceforth since then. And so that's awesome. I do have a lot of tools and support. I had leaned on alcohol a lot. And so not having that as a quote unquote coping mechanism, which it's not, I mean, it is for some people, and if they can handle it, great. I couldn't handle it. So that's been a lot of like, I would feel like the urge to like, I really want to have a drink right now. Like I need to, I can recognize when I feel like I want to escape, and I can feel the dissociation happening.
Right.
And like when I would typically go get a drink, and then I would drink a seltzer or drink a pop or on a walk or watch it, do something else to numb my mind. That's not alcohol. Like just watch a bunch of TV or something. And because I had actually asked my therapist, and I was telling him that I kept noticing that I was trying to dissociate and like kept bringing myself back down to present. And he was like, it's okay to dissociate sometimes. He's like, it's when it's all the time is when it's a problem, but like, it's a tool for you to have when things are too much. Like that's why it exists. It's like a matter of like being able to recognize it and like control it. Now, I don't know, maybe I need another opinion on that, but I took him at his word. And so I have been allowing myself to kind of like, I don't know, like dissociate a little bit more than I was, because I was scared to, because I, had been working so hard on not doing that.
Well,
Right.
I think there's also like, you almost have to first for a while substitute a so-called bad habit in quotations for some good habit,
Mhm.
just because that's how our brains, we're programmed for so long just doing this one thing the same way, that there actually almost has to be like an alternate, like what you've been doing, right? So that it does make sense. Makes sense
Yeah.
to me, but
Yeah, and there are people that I know in my past who might have been chronic users of substances. Let's take like hard drugs, for example. But their way of coping is by smoking cigarettes. And even though there might be equal deficit in that to them, and I get why it might be less harmful if that's their crutch than
Mhm.
smoking marijuana or injecting heroin or snorting cocaine. Cigarettes are not
Yeah.
necessarily healthier, but in terms of the chronic effects and the time that it takes, that's their way of coping. So everyone does have a way of coping. Sometimes you can utilize a healthy habit, and sometimes it might be a healthier habit on the spectrum of like what's really fatal and what's, over time not going to do you the best.
Yeah, harm reduction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
For
true.
sure.
I want to go back, not well, back and actually probably forwards to the present moment of thank you for coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk a bit more about that? Because you talked about it's a podcast, but you're also there's a book coming out, and the book, because I know you briefly talked about this, about essays, people can actually submit stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
now, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is
Until
really
February
cool.
1st.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. So I'll work backwards to present. So I'm an improviser and do a lot of like theater, like improv,
Yeah,
musical improv. And
cool.
so in New York, and I'm not sure how it is in Vancouver or Canada, but like at least in New York City, you're like associated with a theater. And so I was associated with a theater called the Magnet Theater. And there had been a queer show before Thank You for Coming Out, called There's No Place Like Home. And the majority of people who played in that were like white cis gay men. And then they would invite like other quote unquote like others queer people in. And so eventually the producers just decided to retire that show. And so I had approached the theater and was like, it was Pride Month was coming up, and I said, because there's no place like home doesn't exist anymore, is there going to be something to replace it? And they were like, no, do you want to produce something? And I was like, well, I've never produced anything before in my life, but sure.
Yeah.
So I had done stand up in the past, and one of my jokes was like thanking the audience for coming out to the show, and thank you for coming out. And then it's like, no one ever thanked me when I came out,
right?
And then just like the whole thank you for laughing at that. And and so my friend Dolce was like, you should call the show Thank You for Coming Out. And so
I love it.
So yeah, so it someone would share a coming out story or a coming into self story, and then a group of queer improvisers would take details from that coming out story and do improv and like
oh my
bring the story
gosh.
to
Oh,
life.
wow. That's
And
great.
thank you. It was really cool. And so the slot they gave us was Monday night at 10:30, which is like the worst time.
I was gonna say.
Wow.
And we sold out.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
I was like, okay, did we sell it because it's Pride, or did we sell out because we're onto something? So we tried it again in August and it sold out again. And so I was like, okay, this is clearly a need for the community of like, because any other this was 2015, and believe it or not, there were not a lot of queer improv shows at that time. And so this was really a space that was needed. And because anytime that like a one-off queer person would be in, like, we always would call it like cisprov, or just like not really, but like kind of like the queerness was the joke, like that was what was made fun of. And so with everyone being queer, the queerness was the strength of the scene and the magic of the scene. It was never the butt of the joke.
That's really neat.
It was really, really cool. And so I was like, hey, we're onto something. So I started producing it regularly, and then eventually it spread to a second theater because there was so many people who wanted to play that I was like, I got to try to give more opportunities. And this was on top of my full-time job. I was not getting paid to do this. Theaters don't pay, at least I don't think they still, to my knowledge, some do, some don't. They, the payment is free stage time. And so,
yeah, I don't know what they do in Vancouver with improv and that kind of stuff. Hero, do you know? Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting.
No idea.
Yeah.
I think a lot of theaters are trying to move away from that and like pay their performers, especially, because theaters are making money by selling tickets. It's like, you should pay the people bringing in the people, bringing in the paying audience members.
Yeah.
So anywho, it was like building that, in creating this show, I inadvertently started building a community. And so people were like, come to this festival, teach us a workshop, create social events. And so I was doing that like slowly, because again, it was on top of my full-time job. And then eventually we were approached by Gay City News, which is the largest LGBTQ newspaper in the country. And they were like, we want to turn Thank You for Coming Out into a podcast. Are you interested? And I was like, well, I've never done that before, but it's worked to my benefit so far to say yes. So I said yes. In true improv fashion too, right? So yes to everything. And so we're now finishing our 4th season.
Wow.
And through this show, I've just met, both the improv show and the podcast, I've met so many really amazing people and made connections and network. And I try to use those networks and connections to like connect other people. And
absolutely,
one of those connections was I was Thank You for Coming Out was invited to do the International Human Rights Arts Festival. And this was in 2018, I think, or 2017.
Wow.
And it was being hosted by a Catholic church in the city. And I forget which church, but it's the Cardinal Dolan was the cardinal of this church. And he's like a, I didn't know anything about him until this moment, but he's like a well-known homophobic, transphobic, conservative.
I had a feeling you're going to say something like that. Yeah.
And so in this festival, it was Thank You for Coming Out. And then there was another queer act. And 2 days before the festival was meant to be, the cardinal was like, you can either pull these 2 queer acts out of your lineup or find a new place, find a new venue.
Wow.
My God.
And so I was kind of on the edge of my seat. Like, what is this, festival director going to do to like move an entire festival in a day's time?
Yeah.
And he was like, we're not pulling any queer acts from this. Like, that's ridiculous. We're going to find a new space.
That's awesome.
It was amazing. It was so cool to see that allyship, and that kind of like forged our relationship. And so through IRAF for short, they call themselves, they have a publishing arm. And so we had been in discussion about a book for a while. And so we finally met and figured out that we wanted to do it now. And so what we're doing is I am curating essays from people all over the world who hold all different kinds of queer identities. And so anyone who holds an LGBTQIA+ identity can submit. And then myself with a committee of people are going to go through and pull to the essays to create the most like representative book we can.
So cool. Yeah.
I'm really excited about it, and hope that I get good submissions. I actually haven't looked because
to see how many you have. Do you have?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't looked. I want to wait, because people also don't. People have till February 1st, and so I think a lot of people will do it on like January 30th. You know what I mean? Like,
well, and there's the holidays are coming up, and
exactly.
A lot of
we announced on November 15th, and so it was like, okay, then it's Thanksgiving, so who knows how many are in there. And I'm gonna keep like pushing it and talking about it and posting and all that good stuff. But I really want people to submit and have the opportunity to be part of this, because I think it's going to be just another way to share our stories and have representation and visibility into all the different ways of existing.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing that. And also thank you for saying, thank you for saying yes. It sounds like, you really, even though you were saying the past few years, it's like trying to kind of pull in the reins, so to speak, of all the things you were doing and having your hands in so many things and kind of spreading yourself thin. But the things that you have said yes to, it's like something inside of you is like, this is going to work. This has to happen. I have to say yes to this.
Yeah. And it's like,
Intuition.
it's a lot of intuition. And it's something that I've learned through the years is that I have a very strong intuition. I think we all do. I think we have to learn how to listen to it. And to just trust my own process, and like things for myself, I've learned just like when they're meant to be, they are. And like when I'm ready, I will know. And I'm trying really hard not to force things.
Yeah.
And like, I've been wanting to do this book for a really long time. And then it like organically was like, it happened, it's like, and it's just like, and it's not just like, I didn't just like sit on my ass and like, it fell into it. I've been doing work, building it. But I think like, the, if you build it, they will come Field of Dreams reference of like, I feel like the more I am showing up and saying yes to things I want to be doing, no to things I don't want to be doing, and cultivating the community that I need selfishly, things just it's like green lights, like things just keep falling into place in a way that's really cool to see.
Yeah. That's beautiful. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hero, go. I was gonna ask another question. I feel like I've been hogging the question. So Hero, go for it.
It's great. It's great. There's no like divvying up times or whatever. But yeah. So in terms of the book being published and things like that, it might be self-explanatory, but what are you hoping to gain from that? What would your ideal scenario be once it's published and it's out there? What would you love to see come from that? If you could direct if you had the conductor, so to speak.
Yeah, I love that question. When I think of the book, I think of it as like a queer chicken soup for the soul. So like kind of like a window into other people's experiences, and like people being able, but queer and non-queer people, of like being able to learn from other people's stories and experiences, and get some empathy, go in and build some bridges. Would love to like go on a little book tour with it. Have like that in my visioning. Perhaps build some kind of educational curriculum that could go with it. I'm all about, I always wanted to be a teacher since forever. And I went to school for it, and then realized that I don't like kids. and it took me a minute to realize I can still be a teacher, but not to kids. And so
I know I can't stand kids, so I understand that.
Yeah,
that is totally fair.
Yeah, I like a total of like 5 kids, and it's like they're relatives and like my best friend's kids, and that's about it. Yep. And so so I think building a curriculum or something to go with it, or like discussion guide questions or something like that. But that's kind of the dream, of just like giving people the opportunity to learn about other people's experiences.
I love that. Yeah.
And it almost makes you think, if you haven't already explored like Patreon, that could be a great platform for these little kind of exclusive stories, things that increase inclusivity, but at the same time create a brand platform to have maybe further in-depth storytelling, or things that give you more of an expansion from what might be in the book. Like you can really take that and leverage it in a way that's intentional, but also ethical.
I hadn't thought about that, but I actually need to look into what Patreon actually is. People talk about it.
I know. And honestly, I don't even really know exactly what it is. I just know people use it quite successfully, but
it's basically, not that I've used it. Patreon, my understanding, it's a paid subscription service for additional content that people have to sign up and pay monthly fees for. So similar to how on YouTube now they're kind of doing that, like subscribe and pay for a membership to this channel. It's for that additional content if you want to really understand more behind the scenes, or more exclusive action that you don't get if you just do something without a fee.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Because I was wondering, because we had been talking about, me and Tom, the director of IRAF, about I was feeling like guilty of like people submitting essays, and for the essays who don't make it into the book,
right?
and I was like, maybe we could have like an online version where
Yes.
all stories could be. And so maybe
That's
it's
a
a
good
Patreon
idea.
version, or I was just I was so gung-ho on that, and then was like, you know what, I'm gonna have to be the one who's in charge of that. And so
Right.
maybe I'm gonna put a pin in that and decide later how I want to deal with that, because essays that are submitted that aren't chosen, I'll still be able to contact the authors
Yeah.
and figure out what to do with
Yeah.
it.
Well, and you could also do it as a digital download, like a digital, like what's it called? Downloadable
Ebook.
content. Yeah.
Yeah.
So many
It-
options.
So many options. So many options. I'm like, Rachel, we should take some notes. And I'm like,
you're take some notes. You're the one, it's your
no,
podcast
I
too.
know.
You should write these down.
I'll remember them. But yeah,
How do you all
that's
know
really
each
cool.
other?
Good question.
It's a good question.
Rachel, do you want to answer?
And we're not, I can answer it. Because we're not even in the same city anymore. We were. So I moved from Vancouver to where I am now about 5 years ago. So we were living in the same city. And we both actually were in the yoga community. So we both were, I shouldn't say were, I know Hero still teaches the odd yoga class. I don't really teach anymore. Yoga teachers, and just in the community, I had a small studio for just a couple, I shouldn't say just, it was hard. I was a business owner. I had a brick and mortar at a yoga studio for a couple of years. And I wanted Hero to teach the studio, and I couldn't afford him. To be honest, I couldn't afford to pay him what he was worth at the time. And then we became fast friends, for lack of better term, and have been friends ever since. Realized we both were Jewish, and in Vancouver and where I grew up, I was like probably one of the only Jewish families in my high school, for example. So there was it's a very small, like almost non-existent community. Hero grew up in a different community with that was there's a lot of Jews there. So it's kind of nice to be like, oh my God, I have a Jewish friend. This is great. Like I haven't really had a Jewish friend. So there was that connection as well. But
And then to add to that, though, we kind of talked about this on some of our sporadic podcasts, because we get this question, which I love answering. And it's also on our website, summary of how we met. But also when we were having this dialogue, I was teaching in Rachel's general area in a few different studios, and I don't drive and don't have a license. And so I would have to commute by, busing or subways, or we have a water taxi, just called the C bus. So I would go to and from a few studios when I was trying to branch out, which I knew was out of my way, but I just connected with those demographics more, and I seemed to have more success with those populations, and people that were owners knew my name from downtown. So it was kind of strange. And so Rachel was one of the people on that circuit, let's say. And so I think Rachel picked me up, or I might be confusing a story, but I feel Rachel picked me up from a studio and we drove to closer to where
dropped you off to another audition. It was
that's
like
what happened. You dropped me
something
off.
like that.
She dropped me off. Yeah. So this is, I think, all on the same day, if I'm not mistaken. I taught at a studio, and then one other owner picked me up and we went for a beverage. And then after that, I then met Rachel
for the
that
first
same
time.
day, I think.
Yeah. It's a weird, the yoga
funny.
world's weird, because it's like, all the studio owners know each other, and we know that like any kind of, I shouldn't throw it in the same realm as like a fitness instructor, but you can't really teach maybe all the classes at the one studio. So we got to share the teachers. The teachers kind of are shared around, and you just know that that's just the way it's going to be.
There was a hot minute where I was really like the shared bread and butter of like the North Shore yoga community, and like the studio owners like, oh my God, new fresh talent. We have to be like we have to take shared custody of like this person.
Yeah.
But my point is, when Rachel and I were having, we were in a juice bar called Beautiful, which is still in the city with 2 locations, I believe now. We were just having candid chats and banters. And that's when I said to her, you know what, it's better that we just be friends. Like, I just have a feeling that you and I are meant to have a different relationship. And I don't want to tarnish that from a professional context, which might not end up happening to be the right fit. But then being super candid and being literally a gold star gay, not platinum, sadly. Thanks, Mom. But I was saying to Rachel when she said she was feeling, hot and bothered and really warm and sweaty and stuff, with my knowledge of my mom, even though different age demographic, I said, are you having a hot flash? And this was in our so-called casual
first meeting. Yeah. And I'm barely over 30 years old. And
at that point, yeah.
But yeah. I don't know, somehow I was able to get over that and think it was funny and didn't take offense.
But that's also like, I always joke, that's the foundation of how our podcast kind of started without us realizing 7 years ago. I think it was around 7 years ago already, maybe coming up on 8
Maybe.
years. It was the summer of, I think, 2016, I think. No, summer
Doesn't matter.
2015. My point is that that's how we met. And
Yeah.
it just wasn't kismet. It was kismet. And we just shared that spirit. And that's how we met each other. And we've just stayed in touch since. When she moved out to Vernon, we kept in touch through lockdown. And really, a lot of my friends are moving away from Vancouver. And Rachel and I made equal effort to keep touch. And then Rachel wanted to start a podcast, and I had always wanted to do a talk show kind of idea against this gray wall, which I have space for stuff like this. And it just made sense. And 2.5 years later, now we're chatting with you.
Amazing. I love that. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful.
So again,
but
long
that
story
gives you an
short.
idea. Yeah, exactly.
I'm
like,
familiar.
Short
I'm
story
familiar.
long. Short
Yeah,
story long.
or like TLDR, too long, don't read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
As time goes by super fast, we want to be mindful of your time, because I know it's also, what is it, 2 hours ahead or 3?
2 hours ahead in Texas.
It's 8:53.
Okay.
Yeah,
Then
2 hours
that's
ahead.
2 hours ahead. It's 6:53 here. So there you go. You're in the future.
Yep.
I just curious, because you said you're at your parents' place. Are they quite supportive of what you've been doing? And
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. Okay, good.
They are.
Good.
Wow.
They are.
Good.
I was on a walk talking to my mom last year,
Yeah.
and I was like, I really want to quit my job and I really want to go out on my own. And I've been saving money for a while. My parents had given me a little chunk of money to buy an apartment. Bless their hearts, that like
Wow.
in New York City, that
I was just gonna say.
it wouldn't even pretend to try to even look at, like to buy it in Texas or Ohio. Well, I mean, now it's ridiculous everywhere, but
Yeah.
anyways, they gave me some money, and it was very kind of them. And so I said to her, can I use that money instead of buying something? Can I like use that to invest back in myself, and like so have like a safety net? Like, it's not my intention to blow through it, but it's like as a safety net if I need it. And she was like, I want you to just use it however you want. Like, this is it's for you to like build your life, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And then she was like, I'll call you right back. I have another call. So so she hangs up, and I'm walking, and they like they do in Vancouver, they're filming shit. I don't know if they like film it on the street and stuff, but they do in New York City.
Oh, yeah.
I walk by and I turn to my left, and Sarah Bareilles comes out of a dressing room.
No.
And A, I love her. B,
Me
we know who each other are. Like, so like we have a mutual friend, and so
cool.
We've been in each other's worlds for a while. And so
Wow.
I was like, Sarah, and she was like, hey. And I was like, it's Dub. She's like, I know. I was like, I still like, though we know each other, I still get flustered.
Yeah.
It's Sarah Bareilles.
Absolutely.
And it was just like, and then she was like, had to go do something. She was filming Girls 5 Eva. And and then like almost immediately my mom calls back, and I was like, it's a sign.
Yeah.
Like, of all the like, when am I going to see Sarah Bareilles? Like,
absolutely.
Randomly? And Sarah's like music, like I've been able to communicate with her like what it means to me, and like Brave and all this. Like, she had after my thyroid surgery, I messaged her about her song Orpheus, and there's a lyric, we did not give up on love today. And I was like, will you write that for me and I'll get it tattooed? And she was like, absolutely.
Oh my God.
So like, I can kind of see it. But
Wow.
So that's her handwriting on my body.
Cool.
Wow.
And so she's always just like, she's very she means a lot to me, and she helps me through like hard times in my life. And so to see her literally in the middle of this conversation of what am I going to do with my
conversation
life? Was very meaningful. So
that's a great story to end our time together, actually. It's really good. I was just looking at the time too, but and again, we always just like to be mindful of our guest time, but
Mhm.
as we kind of wrap it now too, we've already kind of, I was gonna say, what do you want to leave listeners with? But I know we kind of talked a lot about what we've already probably like to leave them with, but any additional little ways of how they can get in contact with you? We'll put everything in the show notes, of course, as well.
Yeah. So follow me at Dubs Weinblatt or at Thank You for Coming Out on Instagram. Definitely go to thankyouforcomingout.com, and there's information about how to submit for an essay in the book.
Yep.
Those are the ways.
Sweet.
Thank you so much for your time.
Simple.
And I mean, sometimes understandably people can be busy and it takes time to get them onto the podcast, but I was so grateful how efficient you were in communicating and coming on. And I just know I needed to connect with you and for us to have you on the show. So thank you so much for being here with us. And we'll do our best to be further supports in your journey and your ventures and your ambitions.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me and holding the space for me to share and asking really thoughtful questions. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you're ever in Vancouver or whatever, please let me know.
Yeah.
And in Vancouver again, let Rachel or both of us know, and hopefully we can connect with you and continue showing you around and do whatever that you want to, see in the Lower Mainland.
Cool. That sounds awesome. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Dubs. Well, have a good evening.
Thank you.
Enjoy being with your parents.
I will. And the 2 little puppies that are best.
Amazing. Great.
That's what I want. I don't need kids either. I just want pets.
Yeah.
You know,
they're pretty dang cute.
I know.
Love it.
Anywho, okay. Enjoy your evening.
You
Take
too.
care.
Thanks,
Bye now.
y'all.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.